Hello everyone, I'm Space was in Total War. Shadows of Change's release has ignited a firestorm of controversy. The $25 price line and tone-deaf statement from Creative Assembly's upper management driving a bit of a wedge between fans of the company. I'm a little behind the rest in terms of getting this review out, but I wanted to gather my thoughts and do our first proper review justice. I do get all content for free being part of the creator program, but I'll always give you all my honest feedback as I see it as my duty to make sure you can always make the most informed decisions possible. I myself have been having a fair bit of fun piloting the new lores on both Realm of Chaos and Immortal Empires maps. That does come with the caveat of giving the DLC for free, and I do want you all to keep that in mind. If you want the TLDR on how I feel about this DLC from a consumer point of view, no, I don't believe this content is worth the $25 price tag. However, I do think with a few fairly simple tweaks, Creative Assembly could turn Shadows of Change into an experience people really enjoy. Let's get into each of the new factions added, talk about pros, cons, and what I think could be changed to ultimately make the DLC feel more worth it for players. Starting with Grand Cathay and the Jade Dragon. We'll begin each section with what I think was done right, what could be better, and what I think they could do to improve the faction to make it more worth the price tag. I'm not going to have any over-the-top crazy requests, and you'll not hear me bad-mouthing the developers and everyone in charge of actually creating the DLC. Ultimately, they have very little control over the game they develop, and deserve no backlash of any kind for the product Creative Assembly management decided to ship to the public. Overall, the design visually and gameplay-wise for each of the added factions is incredible, with one very clear exception in the Zangors. I really like that several of the races, besides just the three that are the main focus, are getting access to several of the DLC units. That is awesome. I'd just like to see more done thematically with bringing in all of these very frankly important characters in Warhammer Fantasy lore. We're talking Tzeentch's arguably most important demon, ZA's replacement for the old Baba Yaga lore, and the acting emperor for Grand Cathay, the largest human empire in the setting. Circling back though to the topic of Grand Cathay proper, and as stated earlier, what was added is fantastic. The Crowmen are incorporated into nearly every one of my armies while playing Grand Cathay now for their utility in keeping your Sky Junk units safe, tearing apart enemy missile lines, and acting as flying flanking infantry for the Jade Warrior shield walls. They trade up against all other flying infantry in their tier, so you can comfortably throw them into the fray against Furies, Bats, Harpies, and even low-armored monsters like Manticore and the new Cockatrice, and watch them melt away, even without activating their innate Yang bonus. Cathay's biggest weakness in my opinion was keeping their missiles and artillery protected from enemy flyers, and your Crowmen will comfortably control the skies when facing off against most enemies, especially in groups. They will also destroy isolated mages and low-armored lords, and the Regiment Renown version is even more deadly, packing a one-time bombardment ability in the form of the Nangao grenades. I'm very impressed with the Crowmen, but I do wish we got a Crowman Captain hero, as the ebook does seem to mention and emphasize one Crowman more than the others as being the leader, and seeming to have more intelligence than the others. But alas. The Xianggu war drums are also fantastic. I love the atmosphere they bring to the battle, as when you have one of these units on the field on either side, you'll hear the rhythmic beat of a drum throughout the fighting. The normal drum will have two abilities, the first increasing armor, and the second increasing your melee attack and providing immunity to psychology for all in the quite hefty 100-meter radius. The Regiment of Renown version looks a bit more flashy, and has a third rhythm that grants a 15% increase to speed and magical attacks in the same 100-meter radius. Something else I really like about the War Drum is that they are fairly heavily armored, and on campaign the AI likes to try to focus fire your drum, which gives just enough distraction to annihilate the enemy missile and flying units before they can cause too much damage to those precious missiles. The Xianggu War Drum is simple, thematic, and an awesome addition to the Cathay roster. But I do wish the different abilities caused the drummer to beat in either a slightly different rhythm or tempo depending on which was active. Next, I'm going to lump the Jet and Jade Lions together as a single unit, as they functionally are. Both are large, speedy, armor-piercing single-entity units with Strider that also cause fear, so they've got a lot going for them just on paper. The difference between the two is that the Jade Lion comes with two uses of the Jade Lion Breath, which is a magical and fire damage breath spell, great for clearing chaff, but nearly useless against armor. Jade Lions also add the Flammable effect on contact, which applies a weakness to fire damage of plus 20%. They also are going to boast higher attack than defense stats, increasing your power recharged by 20% for all spells, and are considered Yang in alignment. Their Jet Twins are going to have 2 charges of the Missile Mirror instead of the Breath spell, which reflects missiles back at the chosen unit for a short duration. awesome in the right situation, but requires a bit more micro. They also boast high melee defense and the disrupted contact effect, dropping enemy physical resist by 10% and increasing miscast chance by 100%. Finally, Jet Lions have the Guardian Shield ability, which is a passive that gives allied units 20% more spell resistance in a 35-meter radius. Both Battle Cats are fantastic additions to Cathay's roster, and you'll likely use them as I do as your missing melee hero characters in as many armies as you can pack a Battle Cat into. Excellent separate, and even better together as they can even activate the Harmony bonus in one another. The Jade Dragon himself is designed beautifully in both human and dragon form, and has easily my favorite animations of the dragon siblings. In battle, he is nearly unstoppable in human form, as a small target that deals a ton of armor-piercing damage, and also zips around with some of his combat animations. His Executioner passive and active abilities simply delete enemy lords below a certain hit point threshold, that you can also increase through his skill line. His dragon form is powerful, but does struggle due to being a large target for missiles to shoot regardless of ward save and missile resist. It is notable that his one spell that he can use in dragon form is going to be the Comet of Cassandora, allowing him to absolutely destroy blobs of just about any unit you can gather around him. The Jade Court's unique statecraft mechanic is very powerful, and fits very nicely with Yuan Bo's motif as the Bureaucrat, and acting Emperor as Grand Cathay while his celestial parents scheme in the background. Building up stone and steel tokens will allow you to enact certain edicts, from instantly completing all construction in a settlement, siphoning gold from another faction's treasury, or removing all diplomatic penalties for your actions for a single turn. These are all incredibly powerful effects that allow you to adapt to many situations on the fly. You can also turn your tier 3 and above provincial capitals into either commercial or fortress districts, which will provide very powerful buffs to all buildings in that settlement of either infrastructure or military and defense. I'll likely have a short video just going over all the extra effects on each building, as many are extremely powerful and allow you to snowball quite quickly. While I would want to change up a few of the descriptions in the actual actions of stone and steel itself, to make the effects a little more easily understood, overall I do like the system, and can't think of any real improvements to suggest. His other unique campaign mechanic is the empowering of the Wujing Compass, an unlocking of 4 new directions specific to the Jade Court. And while I would say this is a good start to an idea, it needs a bit more to be fully fleshed out. I'll explain a bit more what I mean by this later on. Next, as far as pros go, the Celestial General is honestly a surprise to me, as Cathay currently has a desperate need for more of a melee fighter style hero. Neither the Astromancer nor the Alchemist fill this role, as low health spellcaster units, although the latter is a bit better in that regard. Regardless, the Celestial General is incredibly powerful, able to best most melee lords from other factions, and his active ability allows you to apply an AoE melee defense and physical resistance buff on cooldown, turning your front line into an incredibly tanky wall for the duration. They also reworked the skill tree for the Magistrates, taking them from pretty mediocre guys flying around the battlefield uselessly on their balloon, to a pretty powerful tactician, able to boost your armies with new and modified versions of passive skills. You're still going to want to keep them well away from the fighting. They are now an excellent commander-style lord worth picking in certain situations. Their biggest option is that they can't cast spells and they're not all that great in a melee, which will usually put them below both Dragon-Blooded options for recruitment priority. The changes to Harmony made in Update 4.0 were also overall positive, as you're no longer having to worry about balancing every aspect of your campaign, from techs, lords, and buildings. The overall bonus provided for balancing your Harmony is less powerful, but you are now able to dedicate your province to Yin alignment for more growth and faster construction, or Yang for more research and better recruitment. Being in Harmony increases movement by 20% starting in that province, as well as decreasing upkeep for all armies in the province by 15% and increasing all building income by 15%, allowing for more player choice when developing the Empire, and having a better sense of faction identity, where you're mastering and harnessing the ebb and flow of Yin and Yang Harmony to best fit your current situation, rather than just being punished. The other 2 legendary lords also received a bit of love, and have each gained a set of 2 powerful unique items, which does make sense as having the Jade Dragon being the only sibling with magic items would have been an insane bit of power creep. It would have been a bit silly. And now unfortunately we get to what I don't like about Yuan Bo's faction, the changes made in Update 4.0 and what I would suggest as improvement. Starting with the units, and as much as I do love the new additions in Shadows of Change, for a $25 price tag in the promise of tons of new units, there should have been at least a few variants of existing models added, such as Peasant Swordsman, or Celestial Dragon Swordsman with a bonus for his infantry. A melee hero, as stated earlier, would also be incredible. Perhaps a Croman Captain, or in the ebook released in the lead up to Shadows of Change, several monk temples were mentioned by name, which seemed to suggest that we were getting units or heroes from those locations. While I love both the Jade and Jet Lion, they're simply the same model, changed slightly with different abilities. Now don't get me wrong, I have no issue with this being used as a way of giving us new unit variants or when it makes sense. I just like there to be more variants made for others if this is going to be something we call a new unit. Next up, we'll go over his faction's unique mechanic, empowering 4 unique directions on the Wujing compass. If we boil this down, we're getting 4 new options on a compass, where only one bonus can be active at a time, and only small portions of each compass directional buff is retained for a very, very short time. I think a better way that this can be implemented is have all 8 compass directions already available to you on Bow at campaign start, but make it so that once you do lock down one of the Astromantic reload locations, build a landmark, and survive the onslaught, you then unlock that position's directional buff permanently, once setting the direction once, stopping the natural decline of the bar that happens when the direction is not active, and giving a better sense of truly empowering the Wujing compass. How would you all want to see the Wujing compass tweaked? And what do you think would be better to improve the system given to you on Bow? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear what you all come up with, and it would be awesome to pass on some ideas to Creative Assembly. We'll also briefly mention that the Ivory Road desperately needs a glow up similar to what the Chaos Dwarfs received with their military convoys. You do have the ability to make some serious gold through the caravans if you're setting them up properly, so just allowing the caravan to gain an elite unit from the roster of the faction you're trading with would go a long ways towards making the choice feel more strategic. Do you want a steam tank or a unit of Demogryph Knights for delivering to Reichland or Marienburg? Warbear Riders or some war sleds for delivering to Kislev or Erengrad? Something to go with the one-time unique item you gain for the first time you complete a route. Also expand on the list of cities you're able to actually deliver to once completing the journey across the Mountains of Morn. Allow us to trade with Athel Loren, Bretonia, and Ulthuan, even Talea and Astalia, if they are reconquered by a non-chaos race. More options that make sense lore and gameplay-wise are always going to increase player retention. I'm also going to add that this campaign is an absolute cakewalk on the Realms of Chaos, and only marginally less so in Immortal Empires. In the smaller Realms map, Yuan Bo has a very easy first enemy with the Savage Orcs, and then you can turn your attentions to the northern choke point that is the Great Bastion, and to the west with the Mountains of Morn. Neither of these are actually very threatening, however, as both are held by your other Cathayan legendary lords, and adding the Jade Court to the fight easily tips the scales, allowing a very swift steamroll of a campaign, even on Legendary. I do understand it's pretty difficult to balance Cathay, as having that concentration of world-endingly powerful Legendary Lords is bound to create a death ball. Just look at how the Dark Elves tend to create a massive super faction of all their best and brightest just about every campaign you boot up. Moving on to Kislev and the Spooky Critters of the Woods. One thing they did not miss on this DLC is the visual and sound design for each of the 3 new lords. Mother Estonkia looks absolutely gruesome, and has some awesome lore tidbits sprinkled into all of her various lines of dialogue. All the new units in Hag Witch Hero are also beautifully designed, and the Elemental Incarnate is easily my new favorite unit in Total War Warhammer, and it is incredible that the Beastmen also get access to the unit. I am also 100% behind Lore Master Sotek that it should be a summon for all high-level Beast Wizards at level 30 or so. We will get to the number of units and lack of variants here in the con section, but as with Cathay, Kislev could really use some extra weapon variants to really flush out their roster a little bit more. Variety is what has the most impact on replayability, and in my opinion, player enjoyment. I know there are those who enjoy creating doom stacks of 1 or 2 units, which is a perfectly valid way to play. But I would say that most players tend to theme most of their armies, or create a combined arms of their favorite and or most elite troops. Having the option to create more themed armies is always going to boost player enjoyment, which should really be the main focus of any content drop for a video game. Upper level executives in most companies do seem to forget that all the marketing, all the social media campaigns, they mean nothing if your content doesn't work and isn't fun to play. All gamers want, and I use this as a general term for anyone who enjoys sitting down and booting up a console of any kind to escape for a bit into their favorite video game. From people like myself with thousands of hours into Total War Warhammer alone, to someone who is only able to play an hour or so here and there in their free time. All gamers want is for that game to be good. And it's very simple. Nobody who isn't just being malicious for the sake of it actually wants Creative Assembly to fail. They want the game to be as amazing as we all know it can be, if the proper time and love are put into it by all in the creation process. But with that out of the way, on top of the Elemental Incarnate being insanely powerful, as it should be, with insane weapon strength, nasty 75 bonus versus large value, and a flock of doom that follows them around on the battlefield acting as a health drain. Like I said earlier, they're easily my favorite single entity monster in the whole of Warhammer Total War. Things in the Woods are also wonderfully designed, and a delight to watch rip through infantry formations. My only real complaint with them is that we have known spirit creatures in the lore tied to Kislev, and we get an entity of the warp only mentioned briefly in more time. Don't get me wrong, I never asked for them to be removed, and I think they are awesome, but it is a strange choice over the spirit creatures known to inhabit Kislev. Your Regiment Renowned version of the Things in the Woods are going to be a hard counter to any faction that relies on healing, as these fellows have a unique ability to completely shut off healing of any kind. A brick to the face of Nurgle or any vampire armies you might run across. And in Astankia's unique research tree, you are able to further boost their resistances, and give them discouraged attacks, which lowers enemy leadership by 12 when they actually land hits. Lastly, we gain the Akshina Ambushers, which I would argue are Kislev's new strongest missile unit, as they have both armor-piercing missile and melee strength, similar to the Streltsy, but they are not actually limited in their line of fire like the Streltsy, and are able to stalk around in Ostakia's campaign, are able to gain snipe very, very early on. Her unique research tree allows you to gain them in the very first tier, so by turn 2 you have an invisible armor-piercing missile unit that will also put down that bow and throw hands when it comes to it. Circling back to Mother Astankia, and in terms of her combat potential, she is an absolute terror on the battlefield. As a mage, artillery piece, and chariot that performs pretty well in a melee after you unlock the skill that unlocks her attacks, the ability to pass on the Curse of Aranhir spell effects to any they contact. That is a negative 24 bump to both melee attack and defense, as well as a negative 30 drop to accuracy. Trash tier units will do absolutely nothing to Astankia, while she cackles wildly and blasts them to pieces with her cauldron. She also boosts the range and how long debuff-based spells last on enemies, allowing her to bypass what I would consider to be her main weakness, which is dealing with enemy single entities. She can layer so many debilitating curses on a single unit, they struggle to even land a single blow. When you combine that with the incantations you can apply to each unit in an army, you sometimes win what looks like a harrowing battle going on, with no losses. I would only complain that the Spirit Bear ability is nearly impossible to actually land on a foe due to how slow it moves, but that could also be my own lack of skill in using line of sight spells. It does, however, look hilariously over the top when you summon the purple spectral bear and watch it swim majestically towards enemy lines. Her hag witches themselves are going to come in 3 flavors: Death, Shadows, and Beasts. All of them are going to have the same skill tree, but have a unique skill tied to which lore of magic they specialize in. Death provides an activated AoE ward save with 2 charges. Shadows grants an activated ability that allows you to drop missile resist, missile block chance, and armor for a short duration on 1 unit. And the Beast Hags are able to utilize a single temporary summon of the Things in the Woods, which in my opinion is easily the strongest of the 3. Regardless of lore, they will have the choice between 4 unique skills upon reaching level 8, allowing you to specialize your Hag Witch in a certain way. Slay Dirge will add Terror, 20% more weapon strength, and an extra 30 charge bonus. Wildkeeper gives stock to any incarnate of beasts and things in the woods in that army, as well as dropping Vigor by 20% for those same units. Exen will add an extra 50% duration for debuff spells. And lastly, Mother Knows Best will give a couple of potions, extra experience, and magical attacks for the accompanying lord. In combat, they perform very similar to Mother Astankia herself, but are notably less tanky even before you unlock Astankia's Cursed Touch, and will die quickly if you leave them in prolonged combat. They are also an artillery chariot, but the blast they throw out is much more comparable to that of an Iron Demon's missile attack. A shotgun cone of magic that does suffer from line of sight issues if you don't position well. I do have nothing but praise for the Hag Witches. It is a shame though that we don't also have a generic Lord version, but hopefully that'll be fixed in the form of a Freelcy in the future as a show of good faith, especially as the Lord option wouldn't really need to be changed that much from Hero, I do actually think the Hex and Incantation faction mechanic systems are fantastic. Hexes are a type of spell that doubles as your victory condition, unlocked over the campaign as you spend her unique faction currency. The Hexes are going to allow you to debuff enemies who trespass on your lands, purge all corruption in a province, siphon your enemy's treasury, and summon armies of beasts in a settlement of your choice every other turn. I have heard some complain about how much spirit essence you need to spend to actually unlock the final battle, but I've found it to be just fine on the Realms of Chaos map. Our campaign took 78 turns to unlock the final battle, and we had achieved victory by turn 80, which is actually a pretty quick win for one of my campaigns, which are usually around a 100 turn average to secure the gold. I think Estancia has actually the best pacing out of the 3 added lords, even if I wish a few of her quest battles were a tad more difficult and more had interestingly themed mechanics. I'll not spoil the battle itself, but one has you defending 2 hag witches while they perform an incantation, which is a lot of fun to manage, as waves and waves of enemies start popping up all over the place. Her other special mechanic revolves around combining different trinkets earned from either combat or an alliance formed with the different races. It is a modified version of Grom's Cauldron mechanic for those who know how his faction works, where instead of an army or faction-wide buff, you're creating different banners basically. They can be applied to your units for various powerful buffs, and to the enemy units to give them crippling negative effects. These are overwhelmingly powerful in the right circumstance for the blessings, and the curses you can use to destroy the enemy army without even needing to draw blades, which is perfectly thematic for a spooky little hag in the woods, even if it is incredibly unfun when she uses them on your faction. There's also no limit to how many you can actually apply to either friend or foe, and you can apply 1 to each unit to go crazy. A great change that benefits all Kislevite factions regardless if you own Shadows of Change is the removal of the devotion cost for all buildings that previously had them, which should really speed up your Kislev campaign on all fronts, as you can now use that devotion in the supporters race, and to keep invasions from popping up as often, while also getting those buildings a bit faster as you'll only be limited by your treasury instead of 2 resources. Now onward to the negatives. The most glaring issue with Mother Estancia, I'd say, is the lack of a generic Hag Mother Lord option. In my current campaign, we have a boyar lovingly named Kevin the Spider King, simply to highlight the insanity of the nobility of Kislev leading full armies of spiders into battle. I actually think we need a modified version of the boyar similar to how Drycha is able to glamour the elves under her control, changing how they perform slightly. But this system would need to be a corrupted boyar or something of the like, that loses a bit of his combat potential, that gains more tactical prowess similar to that of the newly changed magistrates of Cathay. On top of that, however, we need a lord option that would fit thematically and go alongside Estancia as underling witches, and the Hag Mothers are already an established part of the lore. They don't even really need a different attack than the hero version. Simply give them a line that boosts spiders and bats further, which Estancia also needs, as well as some thematic skills, and boom, you've got an awesome thematic lord. As for the Ice Court training that has been added to all of the Kislevite factions as kind of a main and background mechanic, I think the system should stay exactly the same, with some very few slight tweaks. It makes absolutely no sense for Castalton or Mother Estancia to be able to influence the training of the Ice Court, so give them a reskinned version that allows for the training of extra potent patriarchs for Castalton, and hag witches and mothers for Estancia, giving all 4 Kislev lords a more thematic and slightly different boosted hero. I would say Boris can stay the same, but it would be cool to have his special training option be applied to boyars as well, since he's so well known for surrounding himself with powerful, loyal allies. It is going to seem like I have more suggestions than things I like, but I did think long and hard on not just how to bombard CA with negativity, and instead provide feedback for the design team to easily add more variety and flavor to all of the factions that were to receive updates this cycle. I wanted to provide options that I believe that are actually possible to incorporate without diverting too much development time to create. I've had a ton of fun with the Shadows of Change so far, but again, I get the content for free, and so I do think more needs to be done to justify the price mark. So one more big point in Kislev that I think if ironed out, we have a very solid faction that will have some great replayability, which is going to be, once again, units. All of the additions to Kislev's roster are awesome, but there are several known forest spirits in lore in the Leshy and the Frost Fiends, which have been much more... which would have fit Mother Estancia much better than the Beowulfs of Mordheim. I also think that more Ungol units were seriously needed for a faction based on the more spiritual, traditional side of Kislev, a javelin or dual weapon variant of the Akshina or Kossars, and spirit versions of the basic forest monsters, such as cave bats and spider hatchlings and giant spiders that are fully ethereal and have magical attacks. This would have really made her more limited roster feel a bit more complete. What do you all think, though, that Mother Asnakia should have been given in the form of units from a lore standpoint? I'd love to know your thoughts down below in the comments. I had to come on in from the future in editing here, but for the love of Urson, now that we have a literal Shadow Elk pulling a war sled, it is a damn war crime for Katarine not to have her lore-accurate sled pulled by a Snow Elk. Give us the Elk sled and the Greater Arcane Conduit for Katarine, CA. Do it! And now finally on to the Changeling. And you'll likely be tired of hearing this by now, but the design for the Changeling is just fantastic. He looks awesome. All of his animations are over the top and flashy, and his voice lines are very fun to listen to if you're boring like me and just sit and listen for lore sometimes. He is by far the biggest smack tucker of all the legendary lords, and I love it. It takes me back to the banter that would fly back and forth between the generals and three kingdoms during battles, which makes those battles so much more immersive and entertaining. His ability to transform into any legendary lord or hero, as well as boost their combat potential further while transformed, makes him the most versatile and overall strongest lord in the game. In order to actually gain that new form, though, you'll need to defeat that lord in battle, form an alliance of any kind, or you will earn them randomly as rewards for his quests and schemes. You can only transform into the unit without their mount, though, making forms like Karl Franz and Wulfric a little bit less useful than something like Kugath or Be'lakor. You also aren't going to be able to utilize the dragon forms of any of the Celestial Children, as that is a transformation ability in and of itself, and you can't double up. Next up, we have Akold Hellbrass and the Blue Scribes. These guys are going to be the legendary heroes arriving alongside Tzeentch, with Akold being tied to your Total War Access account, but free for all players, and the Scribes being tied directly to the Shadows of Change DLC. I have much less to say about Akold other than his design, voice lines, and battle animations are done beautifully, with the very odd and frankly surprising exception of those Zangors, but we'll get to that. There isn't much to actually say on Akold other than he is a great new melee hero that actually heals everyone around him, giving a very powerful boost to all of your Tzeentch and very select Warriors of Chaos rosters. The Blue Scribes are a bit more spicy, as they get access to every single spell in the game, with the caveat that the spell list available is completely randomized at the start of each battle, and then further randomizes each time you cast a spell with them. At base level, the Scribes have a limited number of lores to pull from, but as you level them up, you will gain more and more lores of magic, eventually unlocking the likes of unbelievably strong Cataclysm spells from the Storm of Magic battles. This leads to some incredibly wacky scenarios of Feast and Famine, true Tzeentchian insanity, and it is glorious. As for the units themselves, though, we'll start with the Zangors, which, I'll be honest, perform like utter monsters on the field. Unlocked at your first tier infantry building, they easily outclass all early tier infantry you'll pit them against. They have decent melee stats, relatively high armor, barrier being marked by Tzeentch, and a silver shield for good measure. These goat boys are very tanky, and will be a solid front line that is deceptively good at dishing out damage due to their Arcane Charge passive, which boosts base and armor-piercing damage the more spells are cast around them. This is spells on both sides of the field, so enemy mages will quickly find the tides turned against them while trying to buff or heal their own units. My two complaints with them are firstly their appearance. I know we aren't actually able to get the Age of Sigmar fully mutated beaky boys just due to copyright issues, but it would be great if they looked a little bit more like Tzeentch had actually marked or blessed them a bit more. Give them the odd patch of iridescent feathers, maybe toss the beak that doesn't belong in the Quaddle on a couple of models in a unit, not all of them, and make their axes look a bit more like they're made out of different materials for extra variants. Their description even mentions 3 separate known materials they're made of, being iron, bone, and crystal, which even those small details in tandem with the feathers and current models will look fantastic and perform the same. My other complaint is actually for the Marauders. They do not belong in the same tier as the Zangors. Let's go ahead and make them recruitable as a baseline unit, similar to how they have the Blue Horrors, and then Tzeentch's faction is going to be feeling much less clunky in the early game. The next unit we'll discuss is the Cockatrice, and honestly I have nothing but positive things to say about the rest of the added Tzeentch roster. Just wish there was more that we were getting in terms of generic characters and basic unit variants. But our newest flying monstrosity, Tzeentch is fielding, is pretty dang good on all fronts. Magical attacks and barrier, of course, being marked by Tzeentch, and they have poison attacks, armor-piercing melee, and the Petrifying Gaze passive, which drops the melee attack by 10 and speed of 10% for all in a 35-meter radius. They look incredible, have some awesome attack animations that are great at tearing apart enemy infantry lines or assassinating weaker lords and heroes. Their only real weakness is their very low armor, so do make sure to keep an eye on them as damage can rack up quite quickly. The final and arguably most exciting unit added in Shadows of Change is the Mutalith Vortex Beast. This big tentacly boy is the absolute beast in combat you'd expect, able to easily duel most other large beasties thanks to their barrier, magical armor-piercing anti-large attacks, and has a new Tzeentch-themed Mortis effect that constantly deals damage in the area around it. Every 30 seconds in battle, it will also blast the area with the Tides of Transformation, which disorients all hit, dropping speed by 30%, hits by 4, and attack by 6. They are just awesome. All of the large units this DLC brought are absolutely incredible looking and performing on the field. As for the Changelings campaign itself, it is honestly a triumph in campaign design. Theaters of War make for a more go-where-you-wish style campaign that fits the Changelings' lore background perfectly. Theaters are specific geographic regions on the Warhammer map, such as Kislev and Norska as a theater, and the Darklands and the Mountains of Morn as another. There will be a smattering of smaller goals to complete throughout that theater that will provide you with all sorts of delightful goodies, from Warpstone Doom rockets to a special recruitable steam tank, to things like permanent buffs to your faction or very powerful magical items. My complaint here being that the Realms of Chaos campaign is not nearly as worthwhile to play, unless you're looking for a much shorter campaign, as you start in the Empire in both Immortal Empires and Realms, and all of the schemes are identical and provide the same bonuses, just with less. A true experience for the Changeling is definitely on the Immortal Empires map, as you can choose to start your schemes in a different theater each time by unlocking Trickster Rifts and teleporting all over, or try to better refine getting to the ultimate scheme, which you unlock after completing 5 of the Grand Scheme battles across the theaters. Again, I will leave all of those battles unspoiled for you to discover, and as time of recording I've not actually completed the Ulthuan or Badlands quests, but all of the Grand Schemes have had fairly interesting army compositions and mechanics to overcome, and they are a blast to actually fight. My largest complaints with Tzeentch are less than the other factions, but are still there. The Zangors need unit variants, either a Javelin or Spear and Shield variant that lacks armor piercing, and they also need a generic hero or lord types that work with them. A Zangor Bray Shaman or Great Bray Shaman would be a fantastic addition to both Tzeentch and Beastman rosters. And you could easily have them deployed with the lores of Tzeentch, Metal, and Beasts. Another thing that some might be surprising I'm listing as a complaint is going to be just how easy this campaign is. It is literally impossible to lose if you just watch the discovery bar even the smallest margin. If you lose all of your generals in battle, no problem, you can just recruit new ones as long as you have a single cult still active. I'll be honest, without they have this DLC set up, I'm not sure how you would actually change things to make the campaign more difficult, outside of providing more discoverability to those defensive buildings, or penalizing the parasitic buildings further, which could very easily make his campaign very unfun if balanced poorly. Let me know in the comments below how you would change the Changelings campaign to make it feel more difficult, or do you think it's fine as is? Either way, let's get a discussion going. So there's the long and short of it. Do I think this DLC is worth what they are charging for it? No. And do I think you should feel bad if you choose to purchase it because what is there sounds cool? Also no. Have I personally had fun playing through the content we do have? Absolutely. And I do think if CA listens to the creators and fans that are giving honest feedback on how they can improve, and not just shouting about how awful they are on everything they post, you will see a return to glory for CA in the eyes of a very passionate fan base. Ultimately though, the choice of whether or not to purchase this DLC is up to you, the consumer. But I do want everyone to understand that if they want to see change in Creative Assembly, the best way to do that is going to be to vote with your wallet. Ultimately, they are a company, and they will only change course if they see no other way forward. This is not a dig at them, but more an observation of the very corporatized nature the video game industry has taken on over the past couple decades. If Creative Assembly can snap to and deliver killer content drops for Thrones and Decay and onward, they will bring back a lot of the fans who have left in despair for one reason or another. But they are going to have to really dig in and figure out how to flow with the community. The Shadows of Change really damaged that trust. I for one do hope they can do it. This is easily my favorite game franchise, and all I want is to see the community happy, Total War be as amazing as we all know it can be, and for the company to prosper and be rewarded when finally hitting all those proper marks. Thank you all for enduring my Shadows of Change review. Please let me know in the comments below what you think, as this is my first proper review and it has taken well over a week to get this all written, edited, and then recorded. I have been Space Wizard Total War. If you like what you heard, remember to leave a like for the Light God and a sub for the Subthone. and I'll see you all in the next one.